Good evening, everybody, and welcome to episode 5 of Brimfield Matters.
Hello,
I'm Mike Doyle.
and I'm Paul McCarthy. Good to see y'all.
Yeah, and once again, whoever may be here, there's the chat window on this program. Feel free to type in any questions you have, any comments, and for that are appropriate and that we can read, we'll read it and answer whatever we can.
Absolutely. So, not much happening this week, really. I mean, we have the Queen passed away, and we have a new king in the UK. And there was a selectman meeting, and there was a building committee meeting. Maybe we could talk about that.
Maybe we could touch on.
We
some
could
of
probably
that.
talk about that.
Yeah, but before we do, we have this map that came from the Conservation Commission. And look at that. We were able to get some of those. There are limited quantities, good quality, but limited quantities. But it's a very nice map of Brimfield with historic place names. So that's our new background.
Nice, we like it.
Yeah, national news has a spinning globe. We've got.
Eventually, we'll get a big green screen, and we'll have it all, so it'll be much larger. But
yeah,
we're working on it. We have to get 1,000 viewers, so we have to get some more people nudging other people to watch, if you don't mind. So, nudge.
Yeah.
All right. So, what we're going to start off with, I think, this week is just going over what happened at the selectmen meeting on Monday, and then hopefully we're going to segue into the building committee, which is interesting, on Tuesday. And so it took us a couple of days to kind of put things together a little bit mentally, as far as planning kind of what we were going to talk about a little bit.
Cool down a little bit.
Yeah, a little bit cool down. Yeah, sure. So we were looking at, if anybody wants to, you can go to BrimfieldMA.org, and you can go to the Board of Selectmen or the calendar, and you can look at the posting of the agenda. So we're just going to run down through the agenda a little bit, just to kind of go over like what happened, what didn't happen, and just kind of start off that way. So,
and really, to start it off, I was on the board for 3 years, and Paul for 6, and it just amazes me. Every meeting now, I think it's every meeting since this new board has been together, and most of the meetings last year when we were on the board,
right,
they changed the agenda right up until 2 hours beforehand.
Right.
And to me, some of the reason why you change an agenda is because you have an emergency situation that you didn't know about back on Thursday before the meeting. Sorry. I just got busy there.
Yeah, no.
Yeah. So these are things like the building committee, and I guess I'm already gonna go off kilter here and talk about the building committee first, but
slow your roll a little bit. Just slow your roll.
The chairperson made mention that there wasn't either co-chair available to discuss the building committee at the meeting because the agenda got changed I can get it up here. I want to say it was like 3:50.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we've always, honestly, if I'm not mistaken,
3:59 p.m.
Most committees have and boards have posted as requested and as regulated by law 48 hours before a meeting.
And that's 48 hours excluding weekends and holidays.
Business hours. All
Correct.
Right. And so I've always worked under the assumption is if it didn't get in on that first posting, it wasn't going to get in. I know you can adjust an agenda. I mean, you can, but it just wasn't good practice to change it a lot. And so I don't think I've ever changed an agenda in the 6 years that when I was on the select board. Certainly when I was a chair, we didn't. We posted it, and that's the way it was. If there was something that came up, we dealt with it on the next time. And so this changing, I've never seen it so that you get an agenda on a Thursday and you get 2 or 3 more variations of that same agenda on Monday right before the meeting. Never seen that before.
Yeah.
It's just not good practice. Absolutely.
I think I did change it when I was chair.
Well, of course you did. No.
But that was because of COVID. And things change daily.
Yeah.
So, that's the type of thing that I am under the impression that you change it for.
Right.
So to have, and the last thing to be added to this agenda was the building committee.
Right.
And that was at 3:59, 2 hours before the actual meeting took place.
And to note, they weren't notified of that change. So
Right.
when they looked 48 hours beforehand,
24 hours,
and then
12 hours, 6 hours.
The agenda did not have them on the on at all, and so there was no discussion with the building committee. So for them not to be readily available at the 11th hour, just make it, I don't know. That was ridiculous, to be honest. That was ridiculous.
Yeah. So Mr. Miller is online as well, and he's saying in the chat that for his 2 years as BOS chairman, he never changed an agenda after it was set on Thursday.
Right. I thought, honestly, I used to think that you couldn't.
Yeah.
And I didn't realize that you could afterwards. I mean, we understood that adding things, but we used, honestly, for COVID and for EEE, and we use it as new business. And so you added a couple things on the new business, and maybe that wasn't the right way to do it, but still, I felt obligated most of the time to stick with the agenda that we had posted.
Right.
End of story, I guess.
Right. So now moving on.
All right.
I guess first thing on the agenda was there's a couple of appointments. I don't have to go through all those, but the first one that caught my attention, and actually the reason why I raised my hand the first time, was the animal and barn inspector.
Right.
Paul's reminding me.
Yeah, I was just
my memory is not always what it is, but it should be. But the animal barn inspector, and that, I found it kind of humorous, just, personally, that I raised my hand. I now have one of the larger farms in Brimfield, and if I can't speak about,
Right.
and the chair just immediately said, "We're taking no public comments."
Right.
Okay, I guess
Even on an agenda item. I mean, so.
But
right.
the thing that I was going to say, which I didn't like and thought should be discussed, was this is the animal and barn inspector. This is a person that goes around once a year, maybe twice, to every barn to make sure that the animals are kept in a good environment.
Right.
They look healthy. If they're not healthy, they'll tell the owner to get them healthier looking, and they'll come back and re-inspect before winter hits, so that hopefully they can get fat and make it through the winter okay.
Right.
That being said, and it is also important from MDAR, Mass Department of Agricultural Resources, to have someone identified as the animal inspector. The problem is we don't have an ACO anymore. She had resigned after, in large part, when she resigned, it was because the select board chased her out. There have been things since, but
it gets complicated.
But so we're no longer with an ACO. Chief Kuss has been working with the board,
right,
to get a new ACO, and he's been working, and they actually have a contract, is my understanding, ready to sign for a Palmer, Munson, Ware or Warren. I think it's Ware. They share a position, and it's somebody who's full time, or actually a couple of people full time, and it would cost relatively little, but they'd be more available, and there'd be more of them, and it'd be more of a professional organization. Right. But that and they are ACOs. I'm sorry, they're ACOs and animal barn inspectors.
There is a difference. If you go online, if you look up ACO and barn inspector, there are pages of details on the Massachusetts gov.gov website.
Yeah. So now assigning this person, the problem was this conglomerate is actually more money than we have in our ACO budget, but it was less money than it was for the ACO and animal barn inspector budgets together.
Right.
So we're going to be in some trouble, I believe, budget-wise for wages, which we can't go back to for reserve fund transfer unless it's it's very strict rules on reserve fund transfers on wages. So we could be in some trouble here just trying to pay for them.
Right.
And they just did this, brought in somebody who I won't get into.
It doesn't really matter.
So it just seemed kind of strange, and that set the tone for nobody being able to speak the rest of the meeting because they saw my hand raised and thought that I was being an obstructionist when and we'll get to that later. But
Right.
there's some valid concerns, both as a farmer and as somebody who knows the budget and somebody who knows
the position,
the contract,
right,
and the position.
Contracts, right. So we were going to go down the rest of the agenda just to kind of touch on points that happened on Monday, and I don't think this will take too long. Should we do each one? I suppose we should do each one. So we had the library director, Rebecca, was requesting some outdoor lighting for the handicap area, for the lot particularly, and so it's a no-brainer. I mean,
the handicap parking lot, which is now behind, which was something that was done with Norcross money, I believe, and Zach prepped it up.
Yeah. There was like $7,500 or $8,500. Yeah.
And the town did that to help us show that we have skin in the game when it came to more ADA grants.
Right.
So that was something that I think you.
Yeah.
When you were chair, I think
I was on the chair when
involved.
I mean, everybody.
Yeah.
I mean, back then, everybody was kind of involved in doing things and getting these and talking to each other and make sure that it was all happening.
And talking with the department heads.
Right. And so, and it was trying to make the best out of what monies we had, what limited monies we had to do. I mean, everybody wants the big project, but the reality is sometimes you just got to get a smaller project and kind of go through. When they took the back end off of the annex, that carriage house part of it, that was deemed unfit, whatnot. Once they opened that up, that just started a domino. So there was a little bit more room back there,
right.
And then we got some paving back there, and Zach was great in getting that organized and done with short money, to be honest. So this is a no-brainer. Employee benefits, highway department wages. I was just going to skip that.
Yeah,
I don't think
that's just another unfortunate one where we should have done a what do you call it, benchmark last year, and that got obstructed.
Right, there was a glitch. Like we had benchmarks, and then COVID, and that kind of put a little bit of a bump in things. And then to try to get another, it just didn't happen when we were on.
Yeah,
right after COVID, it just didn't happen.
Yeah, I think it was scheduled for last year.
Mm-hmm.
And it should have happened. There was a difference in opinion, which made it stop. Where, in the past, benchmarking has always been done by the select board,
right,
at no cost to the town, with participation from the employees and the department heads. And the board last year really wanted to just spend money needlessly, and take credit for stuff that they paid for. And it just, I'm very scared that the UMass benchmarking won't get the granularity. Is that granularity?
Nice.
Hey,
there you go.
Yeah, I got to try to catch up.
I'm gonna have the source open up on the other page.
I'm scared that we have so many special items that UMass won't be able to capture everything that we have. One of them being
it's very hard. I mean, it's hard to do benchmarking. For people who don't know, benchmarking, what you're trying to do is get an idea of what your employees for the town are making in other places. And so now you got to find a comparable place with a comparable population and a comparable per capita income, and then hours and what. So you're looking for a lot of things to try. And so sometimes it's comparing apples to apples, but most of the time, quite honestly, it's apples and oranges or Tangelos, or I mean, you're trying to get.
Tangelos.
Yeah. Well, I used to work produce.
Wow.
Yeah, I can't name the stuff. Otherwise, they'll have to pay me if I name it. So
Yeah.
But you need the comparisons to be real, and the reality is, it's very hard when you're in a rural community to try to find something that is absolutely comparable. But that's what we're obligated to do, to make sure that we're paying people reasonably well, relatively speaking.
That
with the
and
budget
treat the
that
employees well.
Yeah, and treat them well, and with the budget that we have, which is again limited. Quite honestly. So
yep.
Cemetery Commission, the architectural services of the cemetery stone wall. So this was brought up. Basically, it was already in the mix. Well, I'll let you take it because you were already working on it through the Commons. So
yeah. So this came to the select board's attention last year, and we knew it was going to be a big project. Basically all the stones in it's all the pointing of all the stones. It's still mostly the original concrete from, I believe it's 1911, 1918, somewhere in that area. And it just needs to be redone. There's beautiful arches, which are pretty narrow arches that are starting to crack and need to be repaired. So we had actually talked about, and when we went after the path project for the common, we had a couple of phases of sidewalk repairs, sidewalk additions, which started at the common to give us a solid core. And now with that common project, we can get from the town hall to the Hitchcock to the senior center, and Cumberland Farms and Villa Sophia and all the places downtown. The next phase of that would be to get a pathway on North Main Street and reconfigure the crosswalk across Brookfield Road to the Hitchcock, and possibly extend the sidewalks down Brookfield a little bit. And then phase 3 was going to be to go all the way down to beyond the cemetery, which would include, hopefully, funding would have been to include the stone wall
at the cemetery.
Yeah. Because obviously, if you've walked that section of sidewalk, the utility poles are right in there. We're going to have to move it one way or the other and make everything work. So it would only make sense to include the cemetery wall in that same project. So,
all right.
Hopefully that gets done.
Yeah. So that sounds like, obviously it's a good project. Mr. Wales also offered on the next agenda item to paint the town flag poles and for no money. And so that's a no-brainer. I think he just felt obligated to make sure that when he was doing it, nobody was going to be calling somebody asking him why he was doing it. So thank you, Mr. Wales. I think that's
Mr. Wales.
We'll just let that go. All right. Access TV requesting legal line item funds for cable contract attorney. Well, for this, I've got two major issues. Well, maybe three. We'll see how this guy pans out a little bit. One is that, Matt's been definitely looking for some legal representation while they're trying to make this contract with Spectrum. And he has not gotten back. Apparently, he's not gotten any sort of feedback from legal counsel. Now, this is a tough time of year because there are primary elections. There's all sorts of vote. There's a lot going on in municipalities. And so it may be that. I don't want to necessarily back them up or anything, but they should be getting back to him. Yeah. We always stepped in. I mean, the chair or the vice chair should be able to call up the attorney and get somebody on the phone and get them working on, or at least give an answer about like what to expect. And is this going to be a problem if it doesn't get rectified right now? Because it might not be. I mean, Spectrum has to understand that these negotiations are probably in turmoil across the whole state. Yeah. And so it's not just us. So we need to get clarification, and I kind of go
good sound.
the Board of Selectmen needs to get clarification from town council about what's going on. The second problem I have with this particular request is using legal line item funds to do it. I'd say
I didn't even think of that.
Yeah, they should come from the cable.
Yeah.
Because cable, so the way this works, and I'll put it in a nutshell so we don't kind of beat this. So cable spectrum uses the number of people that are getting spectrum, and they give a certain number, and the town gets a certain dollar value to try to support local public access, which, well, we've had some issues with trying to get on there in the past anyways. And it supports the live broadcasting and the equipment and everything that happens in order for us to be able to watch the board committees and select board committees and whatnot live and on demand for that matter. So, but to me, these should come out of those funds.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure. I know the funds because I've tried to use them before to try to get fiber, like to tweak the fiber contract that we had before. And they were saying, no, those are operational funds. I don't know the difference between operational funds and legal negotiations. If there is a little bit of sleight of hand that you can, that would work. I don't know. But they should know. I don't think the town should pay for it if the money is already in the cable.
Yeah.
Because the reality is, if we don't get a cable contract that is beneficial to the town, does it matter? Right? I mean, we might as well use the money now. And if they say it's never going to happen, and we don't get cable, which would be ludicrous to even think about, quite honestly. But why spend tax money out of a line item that honestly, the legal line item is going to be thin. It's going to be thin. We know it's going to be thin. And so, that was my other point. So two things. One, they got to back them up. Two, I don't think it should be from the line item from our public money.
Yeah. To back you up on the backing up deal.
Nice.
Yeah. It is one of those, like, I don't understand. Every time that I had to deal with KP Law, and I believe every time you did, it was more you couldn't get them off the phone than on.
Right.
They've always been very, very responsive, very good. Yeah. If there is a problem, and I'm just spitballing here that maybe it's Matt being the Access TV coordinator. They don't see that as a high priority.
Right.
And I don't see why the chair or the vice chair, and really it should be the chair.
Right.
Why he doesn't step in and get them to do this.
Right.
No,
it's common sense. I agree with you. I mean, we've always gotten quick feedback from town council the same day via email or a phone call just to clarify what the question is. Quick. I mean, I agree. Maybe it is that it's coming from the access coordinator, and so that the level of priority is different than if it were coming from the chair. But if he were having that much of a problem, then
it should be elevated, and it
should be elevated. The chair should absolutely be stepping in and dealing with that. So
yep.
All right. The contract extension for the senior center.
We didn't have to say a whole lot.
Yeah.
My big concern with that, I raised my hand again for another 5 minutes on this one. I didn't get asked about it. I, as one of the two members of the Brimfield community that were on this project, this was the senior center study, I knew nothing about it. And I haven't been able to reach out to the Clark and Green to figure out what it was. It didn't seem like anybody on the board really knew what it was.
Right.
And this is what happens when micromanagers take over and, pull everything back, but don't really care about it.
Right.
And it's too bad because even I have been working tirelessly on this project for 2 years.
Well, even the presentation that happened just a couple of weeks ago, not the last meeting, but the meeting prior, they were presenting all their data. They were presenting, and they got kind of squashed when they were doing it. Like, okay, they just need to. It needs to be reviewed a little bit more. So I'm not sure what the extension is for. If it's maybe to update the money or like expectations of expense, or maybe we just don't know exactly what it was for, or was it requested from the town to extend it as well? So I don't know. So we're just going to skip that one a little bit. The special election town warrant, that's pretty straightforward. October 1st is going to be an election, a special election to fill the seat that was vacated by Mr. Leeming. Honestly, when we had this new board come in July, I don't understand why they just didn't vote not to fill the seat. And that would have obviated, I mean, maybe it would have looked bad in optics because they probably would have gotten, but the reality is anybody who gets on that, it just doesn't matter. And so it would be like salmon.
Well, it
does
will.
matter. It does matter. Okay, I'll back up a little bit. Maybe that's a little bit too dark.
Yeah, now me being a conspiracy theorist, I guess at heart.
Oh gosh.
I think that if things went as they planned,
Right.
And we lost and their two guys got in, it should be 4-0 votes all the time, and it should be very quick. And and unfortunately, there seems to be another chasm between the board members, and it's a 2-2 split. That
sometimes,
yeah. And I think you're going to start seeing that worse and worse. I don't think this board is getting along very well, and I think
that's true. Yeah, it might make the election on October 1st interesting.
Yeah, it's the gentleman who's running is a friend of one of them, and it's going to put the majority, a certain way.
Right. I mean, I don't really fault anybody for not throwing a hat into this particular ring, because the reality is, you fault me. You can only get beaten down so much before you say, enough is enough. I just got to do something to kind of, help when you got to help yourself sometimes.
That's right.
So, but it would be interesting. I don't know. Honestly, it would be interesting to have a massive write-in vote for somebody.
Yeah.
No, not me. No. Even if, let's not go down there. So anyways, so I thought it was interesting that they actually went for it and actually went to have this special election, because they could have just as easily voted not to refill,
right,
the that particular seat for the duration of the tenure of his election. So I don't know how I feel on this one, because they could have saved a lot of money for the town. They could have saved a lot of anxiety for our town clerk, because there's no doubt this is a little bit over the top. And two, the person coming in is probably not going to change a whole heck of a lot. And so we really weren't going to expect that many people to throw their names on it. So anyhow, that's all I had to say about that.
Yeah.
The lien on the Tri-Town Community Assistance Program, I was a little bit flabbergasted about this one, because this is a Pioneer Valley Planning Commission project, and it's a tri-town, which is Holland, Wales, and Brimfield being the lead on this.
Yeah, we take turns being the lead every year.
Yeah, yep.
Or we did.
Yeah, I think so. I think it still works that way.
Well, recently we have been kicked out of the tri-town because our economics have been so good that it skews the chances and the money that's available to the three towns.
Right.
So Wales and Holland don't have quite the economics and the financial, power that we do.
Yeah. So, I mean, basically what this project is, or this program is people that have financial need, and they need to get some, especially like roof or septic, plumbing or water, septic or something, and they can show hardship. They apply. Pioneer Valley Planning Commission looks at it, and the group of the tri-towns just votes to offer some assistance. And what happens is there's a lien on the house, and that lien is for a certain number of years. You can't sell the house right away, otherwise you're going to end up having to pay for it. And so the lien goes off over a certain amount of time. So what this is basically is, it's just saying the discharge of the lien, they've gotten past that certain amount of time that they have to stay in the house in order to justify having the program work and the grant that they got. So it's just basically bookkeeping at this point
Right.
for this, and they didn't seem to. So we've always had somebody on the select board as part of the Pioneer Valley Planning Commission, as a representative, as a liaison, whatever you want to call it. And so they knew what was going on, so that these things were extremely easy to kind of go through and be explained. This seemed like it was fumbled a little bit, in my opinion.
Yeah. Luckily Teresa was there.
Right. Special day, 1 day liquor license for cooks. I mean, that's a no-brainer. Town computer usage policy, that is, again, part of the personnel policy. That's the personnel policy needed revamping for years. It's getting it done in little bits at a time, and certainly town computer usage policy is part of it. We haven't seen it, so we can't really comment on it, but it makes sense that there would be a policy. I'm sure legal put it through, and
I'm hoping when we did a major rewrite, or not rewrite, but revision of the personnel policy.
Right.
And when we did, we met with most of the department heads.
Right.
And we had review sessions, and we brought it through council and did a lot of stuff, as a subgroup that, made it fair for everybody, and everybody agreed with it when it came out.
Right.
I'm hoping that they did the same thing.
I'm sure. Again, town computer policies, social media policies, those things are relatively new, so that I think town council would have something, a Boilermaker kind of sheet to start off with. So I'm assuming it's going to be good. I don't know if that assumption is good or not, but let's just go with that. McClure Engineering evaluation for the proposal of the public water supply. And it doesn't matter if it has to do with public water supply. They're gonna give opera funds to it. Opera funds are gonna go out and
drip like a dripping sink.
I don't know why necessarily why it wouldn't be part of the project if we're gonna do something with the buildings, with the building committee. Again, we can come back to that a little bit, but nevertheless, it is what it is. The building committee report.
Let's hold on. Well,
maybe we should. Let's do that, because we're going to talk about the building committee meeting in a bit.
That again was a thing that was put on at 2 hours before the meeting.
Right. With no representative of the building committee available.
Yeah.
Well,
or requested.
Or it wasn't. Yeah, it definitely was a little bit. And that was the one that was not on the original. So open meeting law dated August 29th. This is an interesting one because I wrote it, and
as opposed to me.
And everybody knows I wrote it because the chair mentioned my name in it, and he said this is a waste of time.
Welcome to the club.
Welcome to the club. Well, the reality is I'm gonna say what it was. We were talking about the chiefs being they were using 268A. I hope I'm right on it. Mass General Law 268A, which allows a chief in a rural community that has to be on the schedule to make a schedule. And so basically what it's saying is a chief that makes a schedule and puts his name on the schedule is giving himself hours.
Well, it's not the schedule per se, it's the detail.
Right. Okay. Right. Yeah. So
the chief gets 35 hours a week
salary.
So he puts himself on the schedule for that.
Right.
But then if he does, just a tree, utility type detail.
Right. And so the salary is the salary, but this is talking about like a detail schedule or whatever, like putting on for details for the flea market or for a light pole.
I'm going to try to give us some more light.
Putting in a light pole or whatnot. So that came up. And so normally it's just a secretarial kind of procedural clinical thing like that. So what happens is generally, whoa, dang. I feel like I'm interrogated now. Yeah, a little bit. It's a little bit bright. That's okay. No, it's good. Down just a bit. Okay, good. So I'm going to take these off just so I can talk. So the
You look
chief,
much brighter
so
now.
the Chiefs really need to just basically say that's what they're doing, and that because of the number of officers or firefighters or whatnot on their schedules, they are part of that detail schedule.
Yeah.
So they're detailing. So
And during the flea market, it's all hands on deck.
Right.
You know, there are a lot of people coming into town. We need as many police officers as we can.
Right.
Just for safety's sake.
Yeah. So what this discussion should have been nothing but like yes, and we accept that MGL, the disclosure, and everybody is aware of it. If somebody from the audience has some sort of concerns about it, they should be able to say, I have some concerns about it. The reality was
nobody could talk.
Nobody could talk, and it didn't just stay that way. They started talking about an executive session. They started having some innuendo about maybe what was discussed in an executive session. They started talking about the working details and the ability for the police chief to what his functions were between now and November, the end of November 30th.
Yeah.
When this chief will be retired. And all that came through. That had nothing to do with the 268A that was being presented at this meeting. That's an open meeting violation all day long, if you ask me. They were talking way outside of what this line item was about on the agenda. And so, yeah, maybe it is. It's unfortunate that it does slow down things. I don't think it's an obstructionist because the reality is the Board of Selectmen looks at it and then they send it to council, and then council's going to come back, and they actually replied today that they need some more time to look at it. But the reality is it's not a bump in the speed bump or anything like that in their day, because honestly, they're not doing anything with it. So they can say whatever they want, that it's slowing things down. It's a line item, and they just went right over it to think that it was just that you could just toss it away. The reality is I stand by it, and anybody who wants to talk to me about it would feel free.
So I, at this point, would like to bring in, since Paul had said obstructionist, hopefully this is done correct and it's not backwards. So
I
think it will be backwards.
I think it will. I think we'll be backwards.
The word obstructionist is a person who deliberately delays or prevents progress, especially of a legislative body. So,
yeah,
you know, we have been accused of this, and actually at the end of that discussion, you know, Marty or Mr. Kelly had said that you know, all these open meeting violations are costing the town money and are costing time as well. And nothing has ever come of any of them. Well, I have filed 4 of them. The first 2 were last year regarding putting something on an agenda that, or not having something on the agenda, but then voting on it, which is clearly a violation.
Right.
And the chair at the time apologized and said that it was wrong.
Right.
So those 2 were actually legitimate. And the chair apologized. There was some part that I didn't agree with, and I pushed it forward to the Attorney General anyway for them to review it. And the Attorney General came back and wrote a letter saying that they were guilty of violating the open meeting violation or open meeting law. So 2 of the 4 right there were violations. The third one, the chair signed a contract which was for $18,000, something to that effect, without talking to the board. You know, so you want to talk about what's the big buzzword this year? Accountability.
Yes,
accountability means that, you know, you need to have backup for all these things. And the chair signed something of her own knowledge without talking to the board, without having it in public. So, you know, if we didn't discuss it, it wouldn't have been, you know, seen the light of day.
Right.
That to me is about as opaque as it can get.
Right. I mean, I I remember that one. There was a time frame.
Right.
It was very tight. But the reality is, the board should have been notified. We could have had a special meeting.
We had a special meeting scheduled.
And right.
Within the time frame.
And still it was signed before. And then the special meeting was to just say it happened. More so than anything. I think it was on there to say
whatever it was. And I didn't go forward with the Attorney General because it was a decent contract. It was something that
right.
would have benefited the town. But I wanted to let the board know because, we can't talk much and, it wouldn't have been heard. Well, this is last year when we were still members. So we could talk a little bit.
Yeah, so you could talk. Yeah. You can get yelled at, but you can talk.
Yeah. So I wanted the board to recognize that this was, in fact, a violation. And then the fourth one, I just recently submitted, and that's in with the Attorney General now, because I do believe that that's also a violation.
This isn't meant to be obstructionist or really vindictive. It is. The reality is,
the town has to do things correctly.
Right. There's a proper way of doing things. And you may or may not like it, but the reality is it's just the way it's supposed to be. And so because of that, there are ways of so there are ways of discussing things. There are ways of making people know what you're trying to do. And
so this a person who deliberately delays or prevents progress.
Right.
In my eyes, when the chairman of the board and the vice chair refuse to let people talk at meetings, that is refusing to allow progress to happen.
Right.
They want it their way, and that's it. That to me is the definition of obstructionism.
Right.
They are obstructing fair and balanced discussion to make sure that the town is going down the right road. Not every point that I have is valid, and I've been wrong before.
And honestly, a lot of these open meeting violations that we're saying, it should be an education. It should be a way to say, stop doing that because it's not right. It's not going to do very much to what's been done in that meeting.
Right.
So it's not really obstructionist at all, because what they've done is what they've done.
Right.
And so, but it is maybe a wake-up call or a shake-up call to say, try to do better, because what you're doing is not good.
Right. And you're not going to listen to me, to Paul, right, to anybody at these meetings. You think you know it all. So the only way to get through to them, the only avenue left is either this show if they watch this,
right,
or through the open meeting law violations,
right?
Because I honestly just want the town to be run the way it should.
Right. Yeah,
done.
Yeah, done. What they did for this, what they did to the chief was wrong. It was just wrong. Yeah. So that was my whole issue with that was that. All right, Microsoft Teams. This was an interesting one because, all right, so during COVID, everything was just kind of, we needed to do remote. We need to have remote access for people on the boards to get together. We need to have remote access for the people that are participating in the meeting. And we needed to have remote access for those people that are in the public that want to see what's going on and potentially participate in the meeting. There was an allusion to Microsoft Teams having a glitch a couple of meetings ago where the phone, calling in on the phone, there was a delay, and the Microsoft Teams audio and video, and there was just a little bit of a glitch, and it made it untenable. It was very difficult. I agree with that. You don't just suspend using Microsoft Teams for that, because it works 98% of the time, maybe 95% of the time. Sometimes there's a glitch, people can't get in, but the reality is most of the time it's working fine. And to throw it all out and say, oh, we're not going to use it until we figure this out, to me, it just is the same. It's the same old. It's like stopping participation in my book.
Yeah. The Teams worked really well from the start. And then when positions changed and that You know,
Right.
it didn't go quite as well.
Right.
You know, but that to me is training on the employee side who's running the meeting.
Right.
You know,
Well, the other thing when they were talking about, oh well, when people go on, they're only seeing one face. I think he may have said that at the building committee.
Yeah.
But well, the reality is we've got so many laptop computers that were just purchased last year in the annex. Each one of these select board members could have a computer, and they should put a Teams on. They should have their camera going. They should have their audio on or a microphone on, and they should be participating visually as much as they are audibly. And you could do that easily. The last 3 years, 2 years, whatever it was that we've been using Teams, you've probably just been only seeing our faces. And the reality was that's because they didn't elect to use a computer
right.
to put their faces online. It wasn't, and they should have. They should have. That was part of it. We should have our faces online. We should be able to see each other, and you should be able to see your board.
Yeah.
I thought that was an egregious mistake on their part.
Yep. Yeah, and really, we should have had the 5 of us with computers where you can see the face, and then the admin's computer should be turned to the audience,
right?
So you can see everybody.
Yeah,
you know, and
there's no excuse. There's plenty of computers right over there now because they bought a ton of them with CARES money for whatever reason last year. So, all right. So that's Teams. I think. Let's see.
Skip.
Yeah, the new business or whatever the old business, whatever they're calling it, finalizing the job description of the chief. They're working on that. Law firm search. That's an interesting thing. That's another day. We could actually do a whole episode on that, to be honest. So, all right. So that was the meeting on Monday.
Yeah.
Okay. So we took a breath. Everybody went home, and there was a meeting on Tuesday.
That meeting was really a breath of fresh air. You know, watching a contentious meeting that was controlled well, and I'll give Mr. Adams props for being there.
100%.
And you know,
it was going to be a relatively contentious meeting. Yeah, I mean, you knew just from what was said at the. We didn't really go into it that much when we talked about it on the agenda, but I guess maybe this is a good segue. At the agenda, for the agenda item at the select board meeting on Monday, they talked about the building committee to some extent. And they were talking about, you know, how there was very little in the way of accountability. That is the word that kind of came up. And there was an allusion to, you know, who's watching how much money they're spending, who's watching what they're doing. Just because there are department heads, they probably have ambitions for their departments, and that would be a wrong way of directing a building committee. It just was all over the place, and unfortunately, that there was nobody there to kind of counteract it as much, just because of what we already alluded to. So the meeting, there was a meeting on Tuesday by the building committee,
and it was opened up by a very good letter. If people haven't watched much of any of these meetings, you should watch a building committee meeting. It was, I can't state enough how nice it was, you know, and how professional this board was, which is a contention that we've had all along of, you know, there's no need to really fix this committee. They are very professional, very dedicated to town, very hardworking.
I mean, just to kind of give people who may not know, several years ago, there was at town meeting, there was a bylaw that was passed that said, we need a building committee to look at the infrastructure of this town. And all of a sudden you had between 14 and 16, it kind of varied a little bit, a cross section of this town. You had realtors, you had engineers, you had painters, you had highway, fire, police. You just had library. You had
it included the
senior
department
center
head for every building in town.
Right. and several, Mr. Adams, there were a lot of people that just wanted to be on it. So it was a very eclectic group that had very different visions, and they worked great. And so the reality is you had that many people, and they had a meeting, and a meeting, and a meeting, and a meeting, and they talked about engineers, and they talked about architects, and they talked about money, and they said, we can't do that. We got to cut this money down. And eventually they got the safety complex done. All right. And honestly, they're down to the last $18,000 that they're trying to see what they can do with. And they have penny pinched right up to the very end, every nickel and dime accounted for. And they've done a great job. And so that's who the building committee is.
And meanwhile, at the select board meetings, the past 2 meetings, they've decided that they want to disband this committee as of November 1st.
Right.
So the beginning of the meeting, Mr. Wales gave an unbelievable talk, and it was very impressive. And if I may just say a couple of things that he had said, and he broke down most of the points that Mr. Adams, meaning George, the select board member, not Mr. Adams, Paul from the building committee.
Right, from them, yeah.
And he went, point by point of everything that was alleged at a select board meeting and what actually happened. And one of the things was Mr. Adams' contention that having department heads on the committee creates undue influence and prevents open conversation. This is proven false, as the librarian, senior senate director, tax collector, treasurer, all chose to delay projects for their own departments in their own buildings, and go forward with the area of most need, which was obviously the safety complex.
Right.
And seeing these guys, the 2 chiefs and the highway surveyor were asked at a building committee meeting to not spend any more money, to make sure that they had time, they had money left for any change orders and to finish off the project. And that's what this last $18,000 or $23,000 was that they did. And even when they got it, it looks like they might give a couple thousand, or maybe even just a couple $100 back, but it's not going over at all. Right. Chief Contoys at the building committee meeting said that they're already running out of storage space. That's not because it wasn't thought about. It was because I was at the meetings where they had a list of all of the deficiencies and all of the needs, and these department heads were just crossing things off.
Right.
And
to try to get it under budget, to try to get a budget that the town would be able to swallow. And that's the reality of it. And so they did, it's one of those things where had we done the $24 million project back in the day,
or even the 12,
it would have probably been cost efficient comparable to today's prices. But at the time they said, you know what? We don't need that. We don't need that. We could use that. We should have it. We don't need that. And they did that to have this multi-million-dollar budget come in with $18,000 of play and not go over. And then they're getting wood so that they can make their own little storage area. It's remarkable. I mean, these people really put in a lot of time, a lot of effort, a lot of thought. And unfortunately, they got kind of slapped.
At
the last meeting. Basically, to say that you want to just make a new building committee, and if they want, these people could all apply to it. To me, that's just ridiculously insulting. Very insulting.
Yep. Mr. Wales goes on and says, contrary to Mr. Adams' accusation, the select board was fully aware of this subcommittee. There was a subcommittee created for the contracting work. Once the contract started, they didn't want to have to get the full board or the full committee involved every time there was a change order. Right. If it was just changing the doorknobs and it cost an extra $300, led a subgroup, and it wasn't really a committee. It was a group of
like a contractor group or
Yeah.
whatever they called it. I mean, yeah, they just did the day-to-day, hey, rain's happening, we got to do this, we got to change this schedule. They were involved in the day-to-day, minute-to-minute changes that you need to be involved with when you have such a large construction project.
Right.
Yeah, because otherwise you get, whether it's 12 or 16 people, to get them all to come out on a Tuesday to vote for something that 3 people, 5 people, I don't even know how many people are on it.
I think there were
Probably
4 or 5.
Yeah. And so that and the reality was this was such a good working committee. They felt comfortable doing that and then having that group report back to them and then going with it. And they've never was there an inkling that something was done like they shouldn't have done it. They shouldn't have okayed that.
Right.
They never did that ever happen with that group.
And there was either a $5,000 or $10,000 cap on what they could do.
Right.
So
Yeah, they didn't have carte blanche.
Right.
Absolutely.
Right. So, the sentence was contrary to Mr. Adams' accusation that the select board was fully aware of this subcommittee. Well, as one of the selectmen and as another one, I will say that I was fully aware of it.
Yeah.
Contrary to Mr. Adams' accusation.
They came to us all the time.
Yes.
And the reality is every dime that they spent came through the select board warrant. We were made aware of it. If it was something big, they came and they explained what was going on.
And we went to them as well.
Right. Yep. We went to meetings.
Yeah.
He went to a lot more than I did, but I have to say I went to a couple and I learned a lot. I mean, honestly, you learn a lot. These people, they're extremely capable individuals who put their minds together and, they've got experience and they did a great job. I learned a lot, I have to say.
So he says, Mr. Adams complains that only 24 meetings were recorded in 7 years. Our cable department was aware and invited to every meeting of the building committee. That pretty much speaks for itself.
Yeah, that happened a lot.
They didn't always happen at the town hall. A lot happened at the public safety complex.
Even before that, it was either at the town hall or the annex. At the old complex, kind of where they were.
Yeah. So, the fact that not all of them were recorded, there's a lot of meetings that aren't recorded. It has more to do with the abilities of the cable company or cable group having 2 high school kids, videographers.
Right.
Yeah.
They have to have a little bit of fair warning. And if they're in a place that one doesn't have videography equipment, and they got to use a handheld, there are just logistics that just didn't always fit.
Yeah.
And
if there's
Mr. Gatz he did his, if he knew about it, he tried to do it. The reality is some of these meetings he may not have been aware about of them, to try to get enough to get people there.
Yeah. Mr. Adams also accused the committee of not having minutes.
Right.
This one I thought was really upsetting. This was probably the reason why I stood up and said that somebody needs to be able to, rebut this.
Right.
Only because I know for a fact that before he said that, he was talking with the co-chairs about the minutes and they were getting them to him. So he knew they existed.
Right.
And to say that at a meeting, at an open meeting, was wrong.
Yeah, they were saying that, they didn't post them on the web. They didn't post them like they were supposed to. Well, the reality is they had minutes. Somebody was taking notes at every meeting. The few that I attended, absolutely, because these are extremely important decisions that they were discussing or facts that they were discussing, and it needed to be documented, and they did.
Yeah.
The reality is, did they go back and have somebody type them up? They didn't have a secretary per se, and I know Chief, unfortunately, fortunately, whatever you want to say it, kind of took on that responsibility. But the reality is, there were notes taken, and should they have been typed up and made a little bit more readily available? Maybe. That's probably true. The accusation was that there was a Freedom of Information request for the minutes of that committee. I don't know who asked for it. I guess it doesn't really matter.
Right.
But the reality was that started a domino discussion, and that discussion became, there are no minutes, they're not posted. this meeting, this band of people are out of control. And the reality was, you don't have to have those minutes at hand when there's a Freedom of Information Act request right there. All you have to do is acknowledge that you've got the request and then set a time to get the information into the hands of the person that's requesting it. That's it. You have 10 days to respond to the request, not to give all the information, but to respond to the request and then sort out what the best solution is.
Right.
So that wasn't the way this was intimated at all in that meeting. It sounded like, anyhow, it just didn't go that way. So the reality is, you've got to type something up and make it available. And it should have been probably a little bit more readily available than notes on a legal pad, which it probably is. And so I guess you could always submit those and just say, here you go. This is what we talked about. But it would make more sense to put it into some sort of prose so that you can understand what it is.
Right. Prose. Is that a Word document?
Yeah. Like
okay.
A narrative, a written narrative.
Okay. So yeah, and the accusation that the committee did not vote on all the minutes in a timely manner. I mean, yes, that one was true.
Right.
And kind of like Paul said, if you don't have the minutes, you should get them. If you don't have them in prose,
there you go.
That it's you have to get them in a timely fashion,
right?
And hopefully that can be done. And because I attended almost, if not every single one, very close to every single one in 4 years, and they were taking notes at every single one that I saw.
Right. Again. It was a group of people that understood what was going on at the end of the meeting that they just had. They trusted the people to do the actions that were discussed on during that meeting.
And at the next meeting, they followed up on it.
There was a follow-up, and there was an actual follow-up, not just read the minutes to see what was going on, because these things were happening in real time, and so that they were being dealt with in real time. So if somebody was talking about X, Y, and Z, and there was something that needed to be done at the end of one meeting, that topic was going to come up at the next meeting because it was in the process of being done and it was going to get talked about. So it's a little bit of a different, because it's because of it's being a contractual of nature. It's a little bit different than, say, a Board of Selectmen agenda, which is different every couple of weeks within reason.
Right.
So yeah. Anyhow.
Yeah. Maybe. So then Mr. Adams accused the committee of not being accountable.
Right.
And that, again, is just an insult to the committee that we have. And I thought what the best part of this was, Mr. Adams backed off and said what a great job they've done and how gut-wrenching it must have been to have the first project voted down.
Right.
At which point, Mr. Wales, and this is pretty much what he said. This isn't an exact quote, but he says, what is gut-wrenching is to have Mr. Adams, who has been involved in town government for all of 2 months, insist on deconstructing a board that has served for 7 years and brought in a $4 million project without going over budget in order to bring in new people who he feels have a better ability to look at his fresh new ideas.
Right.
This hits home. I mean, you can't get any more truthful than that.
Absolutely. I think it's interesting. Quite honestly, the audacity of people coming in, sitting on a board for 2.5 months, thinking that they know more about what's going on in this town. When I sat on that board, it took a lot of time getting educated by the people that were already on the board about the ins and outs of every little line item. Every line item has its nuances that, quite honestly, the public just doesn't know about. And they don't really necessarily need to know about, like, these little things, because there are just ways that things get done. There are just ways that things need to get done in a legal fashion, whether it's how it's discussed and whatnot, how you use legal counsel, how you make decisions that are best for the town, not necessarily for your own ego. Those things are important to learn. And you can't do it in 2 months. There's no way. There's no way they know about the Pioneer planning commission. They don't know about the building committee. They don't know about their own departments. Yeah, 2 months is just way too early to have some of the actions that we're seeing and some of the accusations that we're seeing. It's ridiculous.
Oh, that's an interesting chat entry. Yeah, to have a selectman who's been there for 2.5 months get up and say that he's never visited the public safety complex, who hasn't been to the town fair yet.
Right. Town fair. Yeah,
couldn't even right. Name the old Homes Day correctly. And this is a guy that's making decisions about, the future of our buildings. He's never been to them. How can he make a good decision? He thinks that the department heads who've lived in, I don't want to use the word squalor, but, buildings that have been falling down for 20 years or, need bubble gum and duct tape in many respects. These people are too selfish to sit on a committee when he's never even been to their buildings to see what conditions they're in.
Right. It was just, to me, it was insulting. It was demoralizing for the 11 or 12 that are still on that committee. And you felt it when you went to the meeting. You just felt it. I mean, they were hurt. They were emotionally hurt, and it wasn't right. It just wasn't right. And to think that not having department heads on such a committee would be actually the dumbest thing, because they know what they need. They know what they've been dealing with. They know how they've been treading water, and they know what they can get away with the next next phase of things. It doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any sense what happened over the last those 72 hours.
Yeah, and the discussions with them, just saying, I want to be next to this department, and this person should be next to me and near me, and we've all got to interface in this way. They know all that, right. Because they do it daily, and it's stuff that
let them talk.
Yeah,
let them say what they need to say. Because they do know what will work and what won't work. I mean, at least within reason.
And to say that any of them are selfish is, just an abomination.
No, it was terrible. That was terrible. And I felt, if you have any time at all to look at the on-demand, the building committee meeting will be a good one, because I think you will see a cross section of this town at that, as far as the meeting members, the committee members, and you will see how they've been affected by just what's happened after the selectmen meeting. They're just demoralized, and yet you know what? They want to stick with it, which is, I mean, I think that's great. I think it's hard to understand why they would want to, but
yeah, that's where the love of the town is,
right?
On that committee.
I thought it was also interesting that Selectman Adams was kind of backpedaling a little bit. We want to put maybe a new committee at the end, and you guys are all welcome to reapply. Well, these guys don't want to reapply. I mean, that's just ludicrous. Yeah. And so they offered, in case anybody didn't see it, they offered, 3 or 4 spots that need to be filled. So there's no way that the selectmen group right now has 11 people that they want to put on a committee. But if they want to put a couple of people on this committee, 2, 3, 4 people, whatever it takes, then this building committee was open for it.
Right.
But they're also not going to get bulldozed by anybody's one idea in one way, shape, or form. They have an idea of what this town's been through, and they also have an idea of what the town will allow and what the town needs.
Yes. And
that's the key point, is what it needs. And so I think it would be great. They could appoint whomever they want.
Yeah. My big takeaways were, I was very, it was kind of humorous to watch Mr. Adams kind of change why he went after the board or the committee. I thought that a couple of times that shifted a bit, and I have to watch it again to see exactly what happened. But that was my takeaway at the meeting.
Well, if I might, just for a second, there was absolutely an allusion to nobody was watching the money at that selectment. Absolutely 100%. And there was an absolute assertion that wasn't the concern at the building committee meeting 24 hours later.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. You can't have it both ways. That's what was said, and that's what was meant. And it was only meant so that a new building committee could be made.
Yeah. Yeah.
In my opinion.
Yep. That, and I was also puzzled by how much Mr. Adams talked about his own board and how he talked about him. And hopefully those changes will happen, like the public access. Mr. Adams, I want to say he may have even promised that public access was going to come back on.
Yeah. I mean, he certainly, I think he's on very thin ice here, because the reality is he wasn't really, he was there as a person. Yeah. I'm not sure he was there representing the select board, to make, to represent the select board at another meeting like that. You just can't do. You just can't do.
Right.
The reality is. So you can't overstep. You can't overpromise. You can, I guess you can say whatever you want.
Yeah.
Whatever happened.
As a single
resident, a single member. Yeah. A single member of the board. Mm-hmm.
But he came pretty close to promising things from the board, which, it was interesting.
And I got to say, having that microphone so that public access could happen, and having people being invited up to talk, and then to see Mr. Adams go up and talk and stay talking. He was up there for a considerable amount of time.
He was given a lot of
public access worked for Selectman Adams. I'm just saying, maybe it should work in the Selectmen's meeting as well.
Yeah. Yeah. So here's a chat. I'm not squinting because I'm old. I'm squinting because it's far away. Paul's supposed to be reading everything.
I'm old.
Yeah.
Let's see. Oh yeah. Okay.
So I like this last comment by Mr. Miller. He says, "I'm so friggin' proud of every member of for how hard they have worked representing the taxpayers of Brimfield."
Right. And that's the building committee.
Let's end there.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, I echo those sentiments.
Yep, 100%. So we've gone over our hour a little bit, but I think it was good. I think we had some really good discussions. I think we stayed relatively on focus.
And we didn't say a whole lot of the chat. I really liked the chat going on the sidebar between the Age and Disability Commission and Mr. Miller, and it's I will say that there's been some comments in social media about that, a chat bar being kind of loaded or whatever by people that we know. Well, we are more than happy to have people call in. We're going to play around with that maybe to see if we can get guests. We can do a Zoom on one side and maybe have a guest. We can just kind of make that happen. I'm not sure. Yeah, there could be some changes coming up too with our media.
Right. Yeah, the hope is that we're going to be a little bit more available on demand. And I'll just say that. So I think this went well, and hopefully we'll be able to. We'll be here in a couple of weeks, I guess.
Yeah.
The next meeting is, what's the scheduled meeting? Do you know?
I think it's Monday. What would that be? Right at the end of the month.
All right.
So we'll try to do it on the following Wednesday. Yeah.
So it'll be the 26th.
Yeah.
Because they just had it the 12th this past one. So it'll be the 26th. So we're going to try to keep it, probably the Wednesday after the meeting, and then kind of go from there and see how things go.
Yep. Unless college stuff gets in the way.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
And that happens.
Yeah. Kids. It is what it is.
So thank you very much.
Yep. Thank you. Thanks for tuning in. Tell everybody to kind of hopefully subscribe. You can subscribe by watching and going on to YouTube. And we'll look forward to talking to you and seeing you all later.
And if you have any questions, actually the last piece we didn't push this.
Right.
We are available through BrimfieldMatters@gmail.com. Mm-hmm. and then we also have our Brimfield Matters Facebook presence now.
Yeah.
So you can hit us either way.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, we're trying to get out there. And
Yeah.
so, yeah, if something comes up, you have something that's going on, especially if you have something in town that's going on, we could certainly advertise for local events as well a little bit. Just got a little shout out here and there. So just let us know. We're happy to do so. All right.
Thank you.
All right.
Have a
Good night, everybody.
And